So
Very
who do you
awesome.
say is favored? Is this a play draw dependent, or is one deck just going to be a lot more on the advantage than the other here?
Yeah, I would say Mike. I mean, obviously Jerry's playing like the stock best. Maybe you think Marduk's better, right? But he's playing the best shell, so it's hard to not give it to Gerry Thompson with that, without even mentioning it's Gerry. I will say this: players playing this weekend. If you're someone playing a deck that's kind of off meta, and like something like what Michael's doing here, you're either playing because you love it, which it does look like Michael's a big humans fan. I mean, his deck seems to be foiled and signed out, so it could just be Michael loves humans. It also could be he believes he has a really good sort of matchup like this, and also historically, humans has been really good versus combo decks. So I'm gonna guess that Jerry's a favorite if we can make it to turn 4, turn 5.
Mhm.
But Michael probably has some real game. It's worth noting too, we didn't mention this before. Mockingbird can copy cards from Jerry's deck as well, Will. So that means cards like Skyclave Apparition, which you might think as a stabilizing force, might end up actually backfiring on Gerry in the mid game.
Cool, and we're respecting it. Joe's just straight up firing off that galvanic discharge using 2 energy. He's going to get the Guide of Souls off the battlefield. Over on Michael's side, though, I think we took a mulligan down to 6 and kept a 1 lander, but well, just like a pro, rips the other basic land from the deck. And we see basic islands, so that's going to open up a lot more plays here on turn 2. We're not going to have a Nombo game. Play the island for the turn. Now we got a couple of options here. Do you like playing out and using your mana, which we're about to see, or would you have gone for maybe potential a couple one-drop play there as we see Unsettled Mariner comes out?
I like what Michael's doing here. It's important to note too that Island is sort of like a waste in a lot of way, right? Like in this situation, it let us cast this card, but it doesn't let us double spell as much. So I like getting out this card now that gives us a little protection, especially because Gerry fought over the Guide of Souls, right? That's a
Hmm.
card where if Gerry maybe had Guide of Souls into a Johnny or Guide of Souls in Ocelot Pride, we might have seen him try to be like, hey, let's race a little. And then, turn 2, I'll blow up your bigger thing with this discharge. So doing this gives me a little bit of a sense that maybe Jerry's weakness, and I like what Michael's doing. He's kind of being like, hey, if you have a very removal heavy hand, let's play my card that's good against removal, get you to bait some stuff out, and if Gerry develops, then I'll play this Sentinel and kind of lock him out. We are seeing a dashed Ragavan, though, here from Gerry Thompson.
Yeah, I really like this over on Joey's side. He's like, well, I don't have a removal spell. It's going to cost me 1 extra. I'm going to hit you with my Ragavan. It's win-win for me. You're either going to trade, which is great for me because you're down on resources from your mulligan, or I'm going to be able to connect, gain a little bit more advantage here, get myself a treasure token, and take your top card. Because potentially when your opponent goes turn 1 planes into a Guide of Souls, you might think, oh, I'm playing the mirror. That's why we saw Jerry fire off that Galvanic Discharge. But now he's kind of like thinking, oh, hold on a minute. I'm against like a low to the ground creature deck. We know it's humans at home because that comes the Copper Coat Vanguard promo that gets moved to
Mm.
exile there. Can't cast that one yet.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jerry, if he wasn't sure it was humans from the Mariner, he knows now Copper Coat Vanguard, obviously a card that only really works in a humans deck. And I think also one of the things you're probably seeing here from Jerry is he knows his Ragavans are going to fall off, right? So he's trying to use it like a kill spell there, and maybe even is missing on land drops, right? This play
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense if you look at it as like, hey, I either lock up a land for the next turn, or I use this Ragavan as a kill spell in a matchup where it's probably pretty dead. Jerry's playing these main deck Ragavans not for the mirror match. It's very not great there. It's incredible against these combo decks.
Yeah, against the combo decks, I'll even argue against some of the big mana decks out there. When you hit playing against the Eldrazi decks, it's great just to know they don't have too many early answers for it, so you can kind of advance the game and add your gameplay. One more thing we do need to point out there that Jerry was able to do was get his dice out of the heavy play dice box that he showed off there. I love that. I managed to pick up a few while I was over in America last week, so I now have the heavy play mats that you can see on the screen as well as the dice box and. Just trying to get an extra angle there for it. Is what a news like. Okay, if we get this angle, we can see the dice box. But no, just see Joey's hand. A couple of lands, a couple of creatures. One of them being that Skyclave Asteroid that we were talking about before we kicked off this game. Mockingbird's the card that the one drop that we go and find over on the other side.
Yeah, and worth noting here, Michael might, start. We talked about last turn, right? There's a couple ways to read the Ragavan play.
Mhm.
We obviously now know because we've seen Jerry's hand, it's land heavy, right? So he was actually trying to maybe convert spells there with the Dash Ragavan, less about lands. Michael's going to pick up on that probably in the next couple of turns if Jerry continues to play a land every turn, which he obviously will because he's flooding out, right? So Michael might be able to read that, hey, Jerry's a little light on interaction, and that could be a huge turning point, copying a Mockingbird and something like a Thalia's Lieutenant we could draw versus maybe like an Esper Sentinel is a game-winning play here. So we'll have to
Nah,
see how it plays.
I want Mockingbird copy Ragavan. I want a flying Ragavan. Give me it. Let's
Yeah.
go. One time. So we'll start playing out all our one drops here though. We are going to start with a champion of the parish. Don't change your settings, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't 2014. That is a champion of the parish on the battlefield. And a potential trigger on the stack as this Esper Sentinel coming down. Remember, it is a human soldier as well. I think Gerry's going to go fetch up a basic here. Keep his life total as high as possibly can. Knows against an aggro deck right now. But what can this be representing?
I think Gerry might be thinking about Thraben charming something. Just with the Esper Sentinel on the stack, it makes the time where if he's going to use a non-creature spell, maybe Galvanic Discharging. Now he will have to pay ward if he's targeting anything, but does have a treasure as well to pay the ward. So, and that's what we're seeing here.
I don't like it, but you're gonna do, you accept it, I guess. So that is going to take out the changeling. No more ward for these creatures. As Esper Sentinel comes down, trigger on the champion of parish adds a +1/+1 counter. 1 blue up, and then this is what I'm going to want you to talk through this interaction in a second. If we do see Mockingbird being cast, on it is a X blue spell, but if you just pay the blue when copying the creature, how would that does that work?
It does, yeah. So the way Mockingbird says is it's mana spent to cast me. So the X is just a kicker. In the past, they've always made these things where it's at like equal to X. But the way they made Mockingbird is it just says, hey, how much mana was spent to cast my card? Okay, that's what it will be. So it looks like Mockingbird was copying Esper Sentinel there. He kind of denoted that. So there's 2 Sentinels on the board. That's really powerful. I'm also noticing a little bit of a draw engine here from Michael. I hadn't thought about this before, but Ranger Captain grab Mockingbird, grab copy Ranger Captain, grab another Mockingbird. That has to be incredibly strong versus those combo decks. And we are seeing why Gerry decided to fight over that Unsullied Mariner there as he just slams the Skyclad Apparition.
That's going to exile that. So if it does die, we will make ourselves an illusion token. We're going to... I feel like I'd keep the one with flying. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But Mockingbird is going to go under the bus here to that Ragavan. And then Phlage is going to go... was that upstairs? Or did it go to the bin?
It was surveilled. Gerry played his Elegant Parlor from hand. So Gerry would draw a card there. And we're seeing why this can be a little bit of a house of cards here for the humans deck. It has some very strong starts. But if you lose momentum, it can be very hard to keep up. Now, the game isn't over yet. Kral has lots of cards you could play, but we'll have to see how it plays out.
I'm having a look what we've got in the main deck, and we don't have much. No, we just got to basically have something bigger. The only thing we're going to have would be that kite sail, but then Phlage has to be on the battlefield for that to happen, and the damage is kind of already done once that happens. We're going to see a little block skipoo here. You can get yourself a 1/1 illusion token. That's fine. Gerry's value is keeping his life total high because this Phlage will do some damage if it is to enter the battlefield. Here comes the illusion token with 1 counter on it.
Yeah, and I think this game is really showing why the Boros Energy and the Mardu Energy deck are some of the best decks in the format. They have very fast zoo-like draws, but also can just play, a good mid-rangey grindy game, right? This is one of the kind of hopes of Phlage, I would say, from the design team, as the guy also made it, is that like maybe Boros will be something that isn't burned in Modern, right? And that is sort of, one of the things that it's subsidizing is like, hey, you can play a lot of cheap interactive cards, and I will be your card advantage engine. Now, we also know Gerry Thompson plays the One Ring. That's a very good card advantage engine as well. But Phlage, if this was the only thing in his deck that did it, it would do a solid job here of stabilizing most games.
It is on the battlefield, but we do have the answer. As I spoke about, Kite Sail is going to come down. That's going to get rid of the Phlage, at least just for now, turn it into a treasure token, which means we can turn everything sideways. This is going to be 5 points of damage coming across. That is a 4/4 Knight Captain of Eos. It's a card that doesn't see enough play, in my opinion. I love that card.
Yeah, it's a very strong card. I mean, we saw it there with the Mockingbird, right? Like, just replacing itself. And imagine if Gerry was playing a deck like Belcher or something, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Any of the combo decks would just be in big trouble right now. So that's a card I've definitely had my eye on since MH1. And, it continues to impress every time it sees plays. Just hasn't had the perfect home yet.
Well, here's a card that's, we touched on it a second ago, but we're going to talk about it now. These Surveil lands. Any format with fetch lands in, these Surveil lands are showing up and they are doing work. We saw Phlage go into the graveyard from the last one. This time we get to look, do we want that card or not? Does it go to the graveyard? Do we need to keep it? Do we need to draw? We're a little bit behind. We're at 4 life. Is this going to catch us up? But Surveil lands, my friend, like, come on. How good are these cards?
They're very, very good. They're very pushed as well. Often what you see from a lot of these game design things is they'll do the first version of something, right? And be like, okay, what's like the weakest but strongest version of this we can do, right? And with the Surveil lands, they kind of skip doing Surveil lands without the card types, right? They're like, hey, we've done Scry. We think we know how Surveil plays. Let's just do the bigger thing. And, it's been pretty big. Now, a cool interaction here in some ways is the Phlage will not stick around. I don't think. Maybe it re-enters play, maybe it doesn't. We're having a judge check, but if it does re-enter, like if it was exiled, then that Phlage will go to the graveyard. If it was already in play, then it will be able to attack, and it does look like it stays in play according to the judge.
Yeah, a treasure sacrifice this art. It basically just becomes a treasure and loses all other abilities.
Okay.
Each
Yeah, I've got the larcenous here. That is how it works. So,
well, it says it remains on the battlefield though, but it doesn't remain on.
Yeah, so it remains as a treasure, I think, is what the ruling is. So now that it basically like the treasure is over top of it, and then when you kill the larcenous, it goes back to being Phlage. So I guess instant speed removal could have also blown out in combat there, but we'll just have to deal with an attack for 9 essentially, as it seems to be, 6, excuse me, and we're shooting down the illusion token.
Oh, it doesn't even come. Oh, so it's not even like it enters the battlefield, has its effect, then has to go to the graveyard. It just that's hurting.
Yes,
that's
yeah.
You can play when you're playing the small low to the ground creature deck. And then the follow up here, it looks like an Ajani is going to come down now. When I speak to a lot of people about the potential bans that we've got coming up in Modern, people think there should be more than just the ring should go in this Boros deck, and people say Ajani could be one of those cards that might be on the chopping block. It's super powerful, especially when you get to flip it with something like a Goblin Bombardment.
Yeah, I think Ajani is pretty net fun. It asks you to play with cats and weird cards. I would be pretty surprised if Ajani's banned. I'd much rather think like, cards like Amp Raptor that generate a lot of extra card advantage. Obviously, Ajani does some out of that, but we'll have to see what they decide with. It's definitely like a powerful card. Personally, I'd rather see, Raptor die, but hey, that's me. I'm a Raptor hater.
Well, I like watched a lot of Jurassic Park growing up, so I do like a Raptor. But that's going to be game 1 going to Gerry Thompson, the deck able to fight back. That Phlage really doing a lot of work. So let's have a little look at Michael's sideboard. What has he got in there? Knew he was coming into this tournament, knew the Boros Energy was going to be a thing, so I'm expecting some big hitters in this sideboard for the matchup. That's the main deck. Everyone had a little look-see for it. It's kind of stereotypical of what you'd think. Only the 2 colors, though, even though we do have a lot of the rainbow lands. Could no more like Mantis Riders floating around in this format, unfortunately. I do miss that card. But if we can get the sideboard on the screen, we can have a little talk through that. I feel like a news.
Yeah, and a little bit of a head start. We might be thinking, why are we playing all these rainbow lands and not like fetch lands, right? Like you could be thinning your deck. And hey, I think that's a fair question to ask. And the sideboard answers that question. In Kral's sideboard, as we get put it on screen, we have multiple cards that are not blue or white. So for example, Collector Oof is the 3 of in this sideboard, as we see it here on screen, Will. But that's why we're seeing all these rainbow lands still.
Yep, well, we can see it there on the bottom of your screens at home as well. We've got a few spicy ones, let's say. So talk me through it, Mason. Anything here you like bringing in to shore up this matchup?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Sanctifier and Vec is the one that we'll probably end up seeing here. It's anti-Phlage, right? So that's going to be pretty good. And it's just hard to remove. It isn't perfect, but I think Kral kind of has a sideboard that I think he's kind of just hoping that, hey, I'm going to generate a big battlefield and hope to win that way. And then Deputy Detention is the other one where, yes, it's kind of easy to remove, but we can theoretically like get multiple of these with stuff and like pick things apart. This is going to clean up multiple permanents, but the big one I think it's going to be going after is Phlage, and probably like the 1 ring. I'd be surprised if we brought in all 6 of these. Our deck is very high synergy, so maybe we're trimming on a lot of little things, but I imagine we're probably going to see a very straightforward sideboarding plan here from Kral, like 3 to 5 cards at most on the 5 there, and just sort of like try to do our main game plan of, hey, I want to curve out, because Sanctifier and Vec does have this awkwardness where it's hard to kill and we can make it kind of big, but most of Gerry's creatures can block it, right? It's kind of like you hear people talk about, well, if Fury was in the format, the energy deck would just play Fury. Well, it doesn't play a lot of red cards actually, right? It's only about 6 creatures. So Sanctifier kind of says, hey, I don't die outside of combat, but I die a lot in combat. So I'm going to be curious to see how Kral wants to do that.
Let's have a little look over at Gerry's deck. Let's see what he's got floating around in that sideboard as well. Here's the main, a lot of red opponents, as you said, but here's the sideboard. Lots of 1s and 2s of. Talk me through it.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a classic Gerry Thompson sideboard. We have a bunch of cards, all in low numbers, that cover lots of matchups and overlap a little bit. So in this matchup, I think Thraben Charm we could probably see come in again, just like we saw in game one. Same with the Skyclave apparition, just being like solid removal is something that's pretty good there. I could see a world where maybe Gerry doesn't know exactly what the mana is like there. He might want White Orchid Phantom over something as a way to fight over, like, maybe mana screw the opponent, but also it's like a pretty solid body, like 2/2 flying first strike is not weak. I doubt we go that direction, but maybe Gerry just doesn't like some of his cards. You know, maybe he's thinking that Gaddock Teeg cards might come in, right? And he's worried his One Ring will get strained into hand. We didn't mention that with Michael's deck, but something that you could see happen. Very similarly, you know, Exercise only really kills big creatures, but it is a thing that does that. So I imagine if I was Gerry here, I'd probably just bring in my 2 removal spells and Skyclave and Thraben, and then sort of trim out on some of the cards like Ragavan that aren't very good. You might just even see like the last Ragavan go and the White Orc come in, just because Ragavan is so bad in this kind of matchup. And then it really becomes a matter of how much One Ring does Gerry want. I imagine he'll default to 4, especially up a game, and just be like, hey, you know, prove to me you have something that stops this card, and then I'll fight over it a bit more. But we might also see him, you know, swap one out. Gerry, you know, if you build a sideboard like this, you're down to do a little bit of swip and swap, and that's something that Gerry likes to do. He likes to build his deck in a way where he is insulated from all outcomes.
Yeah, well, let's get down to game number 2. Let's see if Gerry can take down this second matchup and get a nice clean 2-0 win. Michael can do everything in his power to try and stop that, of course, with this Azorius humans list. You know, with all the different like creature types that we have coming out, humans is always the one that you know is going to gain something. It might not be great, but you know, there's always that diamond in the rough that can end up shining through and doing really, really cool things. Hopefully, we see a bit more of it in the future, because that's one of my favorite decks of all time. I think was the 5-color humans deck.
Yeah, I love the 5-color humans. And honestly, it's an archetype that I think is like posed to do really well in Pioneer. A brainworm I had recently was like Esper humans in Pioneer, where I used all the multicolored lands, and then I had Kaito to pick up things like my Thalia's Lieutenant. It wasn't the best deck ever, but man, was it a fun time to try that deck out.
You're cooking. I like that. I could
yeah, and
that.
so that is just to say, I think this archetype is underexplored. It does a lot of strong things, and it does have a lot of like weaknesses. You know, it's not like the pastoral removal is really clunky. I think that's a big part of what people forget is when humans was the best deck in modern, Path to Exile and Lightning Bolt were 2 of the better removal spells, and Helix was widely played. So in a world like that, it makes sense why these big creatures that provide a small amount of value when disruption can be really strong. Nowadays, we have a lot better removal. Removal's 1 to 0 mana a lot of the time, and that's just going to be harder to fight through.
And we're seeing a repeat of game number 1, turn 1 guide, turn 1 galvanic discharge. Get it off the battlefield. Don't want to be dealing with that. Don't want you gaining life. Don't want you gaining any more energy. Other words coming out of Gerry Thompson's mouth right now. Michael's like, sure, it's fine. I kept a 7 this time though. I'm higher on resources. How about a little changeling for you? This can be all creature types if you want it to be.
Yeah.
Now, this is not game 1, everyone. We made sure to load up the right game. It is an exact repeat, but, you know, I think it does sort of show, like, Gerry does value that Guide of Souls, right? Like, last game I talked about how maybe Gerry, if he had, you know, a Guide of Souls into an Ocelot Pride, he might do something like that, you know? And like you mentioned, too, maybe he thinks it's the mirror. But this game, he had Guide plus Pride. That play was available to him, but he wanted to play around cards like the Mariner that you saw in game 1, and now is deploying to the board.
So here comes the double, well, it's going to be triple threat now on the battlefield, as Guide's going to come down, then comes the Ocelot. The Ocelot's going to gain us 1 energy, 1 life, and then because we gained life, end of turn triggers, we make another cat, that makes another energy, it makes another life. And, you know, we've seen this song and dance before, but it goes so well together here, because as early as next turn, we can start adding flying counters, +1/+1 counters, and get over the top of potentially anything that Michael can be putting down here. But what can he start off with? It's going to be a champion of the parish, and the follow-up play is going to be, well, another changeling. Get some +1/+1 encounters going. Now all our humans are going to have Ward 2. That's really going to, you know, literally tax the mana of Gerry Thompson here if he wants to start firing off more to go back discharges, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big thing. And of note, too, it's permanence and you will. So Gerry can't even do something like, hey, I'm going to Phlage you this turn, put it in the graveyard, gain a little life, get a cat, stabilize a bit, and hope Phlage gets out. Michael has Ward 2. you know, you're going to have to pay for everything here. And this is where the human set can get pretty strong, right? You make the removal awkward, you make it these big creatures, and then you pressure your opponent before they can stabilize. Now, obviously, Gerry has, you know, a pretty decent sized battlefield and soon to be a flying cat. But, you know, this is sort of what Michael's hoping to have happen.
Well, here it is. The cat's going to get +2/+2, as well as a flying counter. So that'll be 3 more life gained. Lightning Helix effect as you will. But more importantly, we've gained the life, which I think might be super relevant because I think I can see another Ocelots Pride in hand. And just multiple of this card, along with Guide of Souls in the battlefield, and just being able to gain life each turn. It doesn't matter how big your creatures are going to be on the other side. We're going to be able to go right round them. Here it comes. Another life gained, another energy gained. I still think we've got a land drop if we've got one in hand for Joe. He does have 3 cards.
Play another Pride.
I don't know what they're talking about right now. I think there's a little bit of discussion to see about life totals and who's gained what.
Yeah,
3 life from there, 1 life from
yeah,
there.
I think
so
we
4
forgot
life.
Ocelot Pride have lifelink. You know, it's weird. It has a lot of tax wides that need more.
Well, you were telling me before we went live. I'm not, so tell me if we're not allowed to say this. Don't say it out
No,
loud.
I mean,
what
like,
it could have
it's part
had.
of the design process. I mean, like Ocelot Pride, you know, we weren't sure how good it was at first when we were testing MH3, and we had, you know, we started stronger on it, and then we worked our way down, and that's very common. One thing I tell people is every card is Oko until you start playing with it, you know. And that's not 100% true, but it's much more like, hey, you know, so, look at Michael there. Sometimes you start a little strong on something that's traditionally not super good, right? And Ocelot Pride was more targeted towards, like, you know, Soul Sisters at first. It kind of spread out from there and became a more well-rounded card. But we are going to see here, we have the City's Blessing. We're going to get extra tokens, which is extra triggers. And this is part of why Gerry's deck is so good. He started this turn with, you know, 2 creatures and a token on the battlefield, and now has more things than Michael has cards drawn this game, counting his hand. And it's going to get a little complicated here because the Ocelot Prides trigger off each other. It's doubling the double, which means I think we do have like 3 extra of those cat tokens from a Johnny and a bunch of life. And honestly, you know, if I was Gerry's opponent, I'd be like, hey, can I look at the top of my deck real quick? Because if it's not, you know, whatever it's called, the deputy detention, I'm out. You know, I'm going to go get some sandwiches or something between the rounds, see what my friends are doing, complain about getting paired into Gerry Thompson. That's what I'm going to be doing this round.
This is
but
what
Michael
I call like the broken start from this deck. Like this is the most powerful sort of start this deck can have. It goes unchecked. I'm able to go Guide into double Ocelot Souls, into Najani, make all these tokens. Next turn, I've just gained something like 15 life this turn, 15 energy. There's a good chance that the humans deck on the other side hasn't brought in any sweepers that can deal with this. It would definitely have to be a deputy of detention, and it would have to be right now. And then even then, what do you target? Like there's a lot of damage done already.
Yeah, it's funny. I think if I was Michael, I would target probably the Ocelot Prides proper because you're just going to be back in the same spot next turn, right? Like if you we don't even have it, but if you had a deputy here, you know, like as a what if scenario, I think you just have to fight over the Prides, which is a really bad sign. Now we're gonna see this Copper Coat Vanguard come down, and then Gerry probably just turn all his cards sideways in a second, but we'll see exactly how he wants to play it.
Even let's just ignore the fact that we've got gazillion creatures and loads of energy, and we can make things fly, etc. We've also gained so much life. We're up to 35 life against the aggro deck. Like the card's crazy when it goes unchecked. Here comes Skyclave Abolition off the top to go with our 2 lands in hand, so we can even add even more to the battlefield if needs be. Remember, we do have to pay 2 though. We can't actually pay 2 yet, right? There's no treasure tokens on the battlefield, so that is kind of a dead draw.
Yeah, it is. And
I think I'm well for Michael here.
Yeah, Gerry gets to attack with all the cats, and he'll probably end up jumping his Ocelot Pride. And what's also going to happen here is these cats are unblockable. If Michael kills them, the Johnny will flip, and if Gerry has a red permanent from hand, I'm positive that's enough to kill Michael. I didn't do the math, but I know it. So we'll have to see how Michael wants to play this because it's very complicated. Like, you might just have to say call, you know, like I've got to block because you're also just getting attacked for, you know, 6 in the air. Yeah, 8 from the 2/1 tokens and then 7 on the ground. So that's 15 on the ground. You know, you just have to block actually and just hope.
Is it? I wonder if it's even lethal if we attacked with the 2 creatures that we had staying behind here. They block 4. They have to block 1, 2, 3. Maybe it's just short, but it's not good either way.
Yeah, I think it's just short, and Michael might be able to get a value block on the Ajani. But also, I would love to see Gerry do the plus on Ajani just so we can have dice on dice, you know? Just try to make Honorog's life as hard as possible. That's what we're here to do here on coverage today. We say we're here to talk about Magic. We're not. It's to make Anu's life stressful. He's like, oh, I get some time away from the kid, get to relax, do some Magic. No, Honorog, I'm your child this weekend. I'm making life hard on you.
We need
And
more,
Michael's trying to figure
dice
out
than
how
what
he's
we've
going to
got.
live.
We need different coloured dice to stack on top of dice on top of dice. We need flying counters going around as well. We'll get it. So we're kind of marrying up. How do we need to block here? We know we can't block the flies. They're definitely getting in. So our life total is 11. There's the 8 plus 7 that you spoke about. So the 15 with our 4 creatures. What do we need to block? How do our best trades go here? What is even the best top deck in this situation? These are all the things going through Michael's head right now. What does that top card need to be for Michael to live another turn, Mason?
I think here's the out of here, Michael, you know? And he might not know Gerry as well as me. And it's classic Gerry Thompson will drop round one of an event because he doesn't like his deck. I think I'd be asking Gerry, how do you feel about your deck right now? You know what I mean? Because if Jerry's like, I don't like it, he might just concede. And that's your best bet to win, I think. But jokes aside, I think Michael just has to hope Gerry like forgets something and makes a huge mistake, which he's just not going to do. And we see here, Michael's picking up the cards. The Ajani's going to flip. And even though the Ajani can't deal the damage to Michael's face, it is just going to make a token, which is going to trigger the 2 Ocelot prize, right? So we're going to have a huge army. So congratulations, Gerry Thompson there. Really showing the power of the energy deck there in game number 2.